Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the solo adventure, The Blood Hunter, designed by Anthony Joyce for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my Platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick R., Andy, Chris, Manuel, Basil, and Travis. And Gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos Did, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean A.K., Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Land, Sam, Arash, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Scalenia, Nick C. Thank you all very much for your support. The Blood Hunter is a very popular class designed by Matthew Mercer. The Blood Hunter is an adventure. Now, I was initially a little confused about why you would name an adventure with the exact same name as the class. The reason for that is because this solo adventure is very, very heavily based on popular genre TV shows, namely The Witcher and The Mandalorian, which are both the job title, so it makes sense from a descriptive point of view. This is an incredibly effective solo adventure. Now, solo adventure is designed for a single DM and a single player, which is typically not the ideal D&D situation. Usually playing with a group of players, make a party, that's how all of D&D is balanced. So if you want to have just a solo adventure, you need to have a very carefully constructed scenario with challenges that can be surpassed by a single adventure and maybe with a NPC sidekick, and I think this does a very excellent job with that. It also has incredible original artwork all the way through. Gordon McAlpin, which is one of my favorite DM's Guild artists. You should definitely check out their multiplex comic series. It's very awesome, and not just because I worked at a movie theater throughout my high school and college years. This cover is fantastic. As someone with a new baby and who also wields a flaming sword, I'm glad that I'm finally represented effectively on the cover of a DM's Guild product. It's well organized, it's professionally edited, it has an excellent layout, full grid battle maps by Elven Tower, which is always awesome to see. You'll see that in a second, but whenever I complain about the map quality or lack of maps in a lot of DM's Guild products, this is so far in the other direction. This is the absolute perfect case scenario of maps. It's organized into chapters, and it does a really fun job of balancing those important pillars of D&D: combat, exploration, and role-playing. It also acts as kind of a pseudo-sequel to Lost Mine of Phandelver, which initially I was honestly bummed about whenever I saw Chapter 2 Phandalin and the fact that it takes place in this city that we've seen countless times before. I mean, at this point, the actual adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is unquestionably the most popular adventure and the one most folks, if they've played D&D, have probably played by now. So the advantage to that is you recognize the town and it might be fun to return there. The disadvantage is, God, I'm sick of Phandalin. You know, can we get the hell out of there? We're in the Sword Coast so much, and within the Sword Coast, we're in Phandalin so much at this point, you know, Icespire Peak and all that. So I was initially kind of bummed to see that, but thankfully it doesn't reuse any of the actual locations. Instead, it uses a new swamp location, so we get a whole new map for that, and it's a whole new adventure and series. So thankfully, it doesn't actually reuse any of the other material except for Phandalin and for... there is a fun callback in the town. I guess I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but where the characters turn in a quest to Harbin Wester, which is, of course, an NPC in Lost Mine of Phandelver, and they are actually attacked, or they see a halfling bard attacked by a group of bandits who are supposed to be the original Red Brand bandits who got their butts kicked by the original adventurer. So, on the one hand, it's kind of fun to have a sequel in sort of to people that have played that adventure. On the other hand, I'm also kind of done with Phandalin. I love the en medias res kind of scenario where we start the adventure. The solo player has already tracked a werewolf, which is always a good way of starting off, any episode or series. We're already in the middle of the action. In this case, in a lot of these adventures, like Adventures League stuff, you start off, you get the quest, you have to do a bunch of role, but you have to do a lot of stuff where you get into like the meat of the adventure. In this case, you are standing outside of a cottage. You've tracked a werewolf to this person's house. Turns out it's this older woman. I think she was an older adventurer who has had lycanthropy like for just about her whole life, and she's getting on in years, and she's now unfortunately finally succumbing to, I love the werewolf's wearing an apron here, to lycanthropy. So you have to deal with that, and it's an interesting role-playing, like immediately you're faced with an interesting role-playing scenario where this person is, not evil, but they are cursed with lycanthropy, and you are a blood hunter who is designed to defeat these creatures of evil. So you have to decide, do you want to just kill them? There are thankfully like silvered manacles in this house, which kind of immediately could, a good DM would explain that situation, and then it's up to the player if you want to try to actually subdue this woman and drag her into town and try to deal with her from there. And unfortunately, it's very hard to cure lycanthropy in this magical universe still. I think you have to use the wish spell, it stated, but I thought this was a really cool scenario, and as you can see, we get really gorgeous maps for literally all of these scenarios that are involved, which is fantastic. So once you drag them back to Phandalin, then you get a quest from a very surprising NPC of Mordenkainen, who makes an appearance, which is really cool. The DM's Guild lets you use all of the toys in the toolbox of D&D, and you pay a deep price to do that. And so often I don't see them used enough. It's a lot of times you'll see this adventure that takes place in its completely own original town with new monsters and everything, and I almost feel like, do you still want to use the DM's Guild for that? If you're not using all the tools, you're losing so much of your revenue by putting it on the DM's Guild. I don't want to wax poetic about all of that, but my point is, if you're going to be on the DM's Guild, then use that stuff. Go ahead and use it. Now I'm saying use Phandalin, but, use, I love to see Mordenkainen here in this case. So I thought that was a really fun use of a very popular NPC, and I think that would be fun for a lot of folks. And if they don't know who Mordenkainen is, then it's just kind of a fun, not quite a Deus Ex Machina because he doesn't come in at the end and save the day, but he does act as a mysterious quest giver who's all powerful and doesn't explain things. It kind of keeps it, in the periphery. So I think that's really fun, and also equips the player, which is nice. You get like a +1 weapon, potions of healing, and ring of protection, which is always cool. Very well organized here, though. You can see you've got your sidebars where you're supposed to read aloud the text, and then you've got bullet points of italicized dialogue, which is an interesting way of doing dialogue. So instead of having these big long paragraphs of a cutscene, instead it just kind of gives you which is actually honestly kind of how I make mine. And not to give a shout out, but Platinum patrons get access to my D&D prep notes, but it's just a kind of, you can still write down like things the NPC will say, but you don't know exactly what the players will say. So it's almost like it's game design. You have to basically rely on the players using certain keyword phrases, and then based on that, you can have the NPC then talk and try to, in the moment, then create a more organic and not just, stating things. And that's the advantage of having a live DM, is you don't have to just, the person click on the keyword and you give off a statement. You can make it a more organic conversation. But I do think this is a very effective way of doing dialogue, and it's used in a couple different situations where you've got some more dialogue involved. So that's just chapter 2, basically, is going to town and getting the quest from Mordenkainen, and then the quest is to bring the child. It's literally fucking Mandalorian. It is, you have to go and retrieve this baby for unknown reasons. And the baby is currently in the clutches of a hag. I think it's a green hag. Yes, it's a green hag named Mercy Emerald Eyes, who is a very unconventional hag, which I'm always a fan of. She's not this old, decrepit, evil crone. She's actually a very attractive, pragmatic, kind of loner spellcaster. Yes, she does eat people. But, they had it coming, I think. They attacked her. So it's a really good, like, Shades of Grey moment. And it's made even better by the fact that you go in this, and by the way, amazing map once again. I love that this is designed as a dungeon crawl, even though it is in complete overland travel. It's, you can see here the by feet thing. It's not exactly a grid map, but it's a really cool situation where the players have to make the blood hunter specifically, because you are playing a specific class, and this whole adventure is designed for that class, has to roll those survival checks to track the monsters. That's something that blood hunter is good at, is tracking and hunting monsters. And you're supposed to do that every time you reach one of these areas. And of course, there's an encounter in all of them. Some are combat related, and some are more immersive and expository. And if you fail, there's this magical billowing fog that teleports you back to the entrance. Now, normally, that sounds like a tedious pain in the ass. But in this case, I think it's pretty effective, because that would encourage, for me at least, if from both a player and a DM standpoint, that would encourage me to well, maybe I'll go down this path then instead and see where that leads me, and let you do more of these encounters. Because as you can see already, there's branching paths to get to the endpoint up here, which is the hag's home, which is it's a hollowed out giant skull, which is also awesome that we get a map for. So it's a really, really well designed. I'm going to use the word dungeon, although obviously it's not a literal dungeon, but it is kind of designed that way, but with a really cool system of having to be teleported back to the entrance. And it's weird, because usually in video games, when you have that aspect, that's a pain in the butt, but video games also usually rely on just random bullshit encounters, and this one obviously doesn't have that. It's all the encounters are very carefully scripted so that each room has its own special thing going on. There's will-o-wisps that will lead your character into quicksand. There's a shambling mound that can attack you. There's a wight that will challenge you to a duel. There's a really cool backstory, by the way, where the hag was attacked by this. Was it a hobgoblin or something? I forget. I think it was an army of hobgoblins that actually killed her coven, and as a response, she cast this magical spell that enveloped the entire land in this magical fog, and definitely killed all of the hobgoblins, and it turned the leader into a wraith, and then his captain into a wight, and you can choose to deal with both of them or neither one or whatever. But there's an interesting scenario where if you come upon the wight, he will want to basically enlist the player character to help him defeat the hag. But as I mentioned in the beginning of this long explanation of this entire chapter, the hag isn't necessarily evil, which is also really cool. She's very just pragmatic and friendly, and just wants to live by herself and do her own thing. And she was very vengeful on the hobgoblins who attacked her and destroyed them. And you come across all these different events because this child is a very popular target, and you don't know why. It's all very mysterious, but you'll come across a drow who's been severed and chopped up, and then at one point it's crawling claw comes out of the swamp and chokes it to death while it tries to. And the hag can use a spell to speak through these dying and dead the drow, and then there's a red wizard who's decapitated with a staff through its fucking body that's being held up. And it's same thing, as she can talk to the hag and describe how these forces have come after her, and she will destroy anybody who does. But there's an interesting choice for the player to make is, do you see this hag as this dangerous boss threat that you have to then fight at the end, or do you come up and say, hey, I'm not here to kill this child, I'm here to protect them, which is kind of what Morden kind of basically sent you to do. I understand you've had some troubles, ma'am, and it's up to the player character to really decide what they want to do. And thankfully, there is still a final confrontation regardless. You can either choose to fight that hag, which I believe is in Chapter 4. You can see the really cool skull map here. Really cute drow baby. Or you can you can ally with the hag, and then she wants you to then go kill the hobgoblin, who is now a wraith with a bunch of specters, and that becomes basically your final confrontation. And then the magical fog can lift, and then you can leave. So it's a really cool situation at the end. There's just a wonderful amount of storytelling. There's a ton of just really cool events. I mean, there's a part where you can sneak past a manticore. My favorite is at this bridge. There's a bullywug emperor. I'm just going to read this out because it's straight up amazing. Emperor Blugblug is the ruler of Ribia, an ancient bullywug empire spanning the entire 40 square feet in front of the swamp bridge. Emperor Blugblug always rides atop his trusty mount, a giant frog, and guards his empire's borders with his life. Unfortunately, he has no subjects. It's just so fucking goofy, and I love it because it can't all be just dark and death and blood, and there's a really fun undercurrent of humor. When you go and have to knock on Harbin Wester's door, there's a certain pattern you have to take, otherwise he screams at you that you're a troll. There's these funny pixies that are princess what was it, Princess Binky and Prince Stinky. There's a good amount of humor that balances very well with the fact that you're meeting with a hag that has eaten people and killed all these people that are in various states of death and destruction. So I thought that was very important and drives humor very well. And of course, the artwork does a really great job of that. I love the comic tone here. I think it really fits the the PG-13 action adventure level of D&D. It captures that very, very well. And the fact that we get original artwork that depicts actual scenes from the adventure is freaking awesome. I also love that. It really adds. This is already a very, very well designed solo adventure. It hits all the different pillars. It's very well written, professionally laid out, edited, everything. And then to take that and also give it original artwork and full color grid battle maps. Holy crap. I could not be more impressed with this entire product. It is just absolutely incredible. To the point where I almost wish there was a version of this that was balanced for a full party, because I would be more likely to run something like that, or at least a portion of this. Like just the swamp alone is a really cool scenario. You can modify like why your players need to go meet with this green hag in the swamp, but you could just lift this swamp area and put that into anywhere else, and I think that would be absolutely amazing. You just have to make some balancing adjustments, because it's balanced for a single player with a very fun bard sidekick who very much feels like that Witcher, kind of goofy bard. In fact, it's a halfling literally named Olos Bigbottom, I believe, which is very cute and funny. On top of all that, we get a whole new let's see, where is it? There we go. Appendix H Blood Hunter concoction. So on top of everything the Blood Hunter can do, there is a really fun way of harvesting monster parts and then being able to build a concoction on top of that. I'm a big fan of the Monster Hunter games, like Monster Hunter World, so I'm very well versed in the aspect of crafting from slain monsters. And this does a good job of that without making it overly complicated. It's just a single check. You make a nature roll. The DC depends on the monster's challenge rating. The monster has to have been dead within the last hour, and then you can concoct by spending money just right there. It's very video gamey, but I'm totally fine with that. And then you can concoct this magic potion, which gives you this unique ability that lasts for an hour. You can only have one available, and smartly, this adventure, despite it says 1 to 2 hours, which combat with one person probably does shorten things quite a bit, but there are impressively a lot of different creatures in here. You'll fight a werewolf, you can meet a drow, you could fight a wight, you could fight what else is there? A shambling mound. They have all those options, so you can actually craft all of these potions available. It's not just like here's a supplement for the future. It's like no, here's something you can use right now, which is really fun. My only real complaint is the ending. It seems to end a little bit earlier than where I wanted to, which is that it's basically similar to The Mandalorian Episode 1. It basically ends as soon as you get the child. And then from there, it even says, like, hey, this adventure is, kind of a test pilot for this kind of system, and we don't really have, like, a sequel in mind or anything like that. In fact, here are different options for what the child could be and who they are. And a lot of them, it's like it's a reborn elder god, or it's Halaster's clone, or it's the reincarnation of Neznar, to use another Lost Mine of Phandelver reference, which all of that is fine. I'm less interested. Well, I guess it's still interesting about what the child is, but it's even missing the part where you like return, back to Phandalin, and then you realize all these like factions and forces are after you. Like it's setting up a really cool adventure, but it ends before it does any of that. So as much as I love, The Mandalorian and how that structure works, this is like just the first episode of The Mandalorian and then never continues after that. If The Mandalorian did that, that would not be good. So it's a bit of a bummer from a storytelling standpoint. In terms of doing like a one-shot solo adventure, it's very, very good, but it definitely leaves on a huge tease to where you don't even know what this baby is. It also doesn't even do I guess The Mandalorian Episode 1 didn't do that either, where the child actually has like the powers. Baby Yoda, which I guess spoilers for Mandalorian, by the way. I've been spoiling that the whole time, but you should probably watch that show. But it's quite good. But so it doesn't quite go as far as I wanted it to in terms of I don't even know where the ending would be here. It presents a really cool concept where you have to get this child But it doesn't do the twist of the Mandalorian, which is like, oh, suddenly you were here because of a child. Like, it told you about the child earlier, and then you have the child, and then it just kind of ends like right after that. And it does say, hey, you can end it by, you know, killing this person or killing that person, but it never says, okay, now that you've got the child, what happens next? So it literally ends before you even make it back to town. So I would have liked a little bit more of a story resolution besides just a, here's the options for what the child is. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for The Blood Hunter. Pros, gorgeous layout and original artwork. Absolutely phenomenal job. This adventure looks amazing. The artwork is absolutely fantastic. I love that we get depictions of actual scenes from the adventure. All the sidebars, you know, everything just looks absolutely perfect. Pros, it's an effective solo adventure that emphasizes the Blood Hunter's strengths, which is really a cool idea to have a solo adventure specifically designed for a single character class. I would love to see a series that was solo adventures with certain classes in mind. Make one for, you know, here's the Druid solo adventure, here's the Warlock solo adventure, and here's the Rogue solo adventure, and really build on the class's strengths and themes about what they could do. Obviously, the Blood Hunter is about, you know, hunting monsters. You could have the Rogue about, you know, doing rogue shit in a city, and Druid is about doing, you know, nature shit. So all of that, I think, can be a very, very effective way of doing solo adventures. I think it's really cool. Pros, full color grid and region maps by Elven Tower with separate DM and player handouts. Absolutely phenomenal. So all the maps you see, they do come in a separate zip file that include grids, no grids, player versions, and DM versions, which is absolute perfection. That's what I want to see every time. And obviously this art style is just chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. So it's all those times that I complain about maps, this is the gold standard of what amazing maps look like. And Pro, 14 Blood Hunter concoctions with rules for harvesting monster parts. I love that. That is a additional thing you can do, which is part of the advantage to having an adventure based on a specific class, as you can then expand that class's features. And I personally just think the whole monster hunting thing, you know, it's something you do in D&D all the time, and I think a lot of characters, especially a character class that was specifically about hunting monsters, would definitely be into harvesting them and using those abilities to enhance themselves. Cons, again, my only con is that it feels like the first episode of a much bigger story, so it just kind of ends a little too soon for me. Even if you wanted to make a tease, I think it ends a little too soon. I would have liked to return to town and have some resolution there. But I just don't... for doing a one-shot, it doesn't quite wrap it up, because it's like, okay, now what? You know, we've got this child. What do we do now? What kind of consequences does that have? And are we supposed to keep playing this, you know, solo Blood Hunter adventure for more sessions? I don't know. So it's a little bit disappointing in that regard. Final verdict: with incredible artwork, professional layout, and an adventure inspired by popular genre TV shows, The Blood Hunter is an effective solo adventure that capitalizes on the class's themes and strengths. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.